everybody. We are back to talk about the latest 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery. We're talking episode 7, episode 8, and they are Light and Shadows and If Memory Serves. And I'm really excited. I'm Rachel, and Tom is here to talk about them with me. But thanks so much. And yeah, these are 2 pretty interesting episodes. I'm really curious, especially being a diehard Star Trek fan, what you thought.
Yeah, lots for the fans to digest.
Yes. So, well, let's dive in. So, Light and Shadows, we have them searching for, in this last episode, they've been looking for Spock, and then they find Spock, and but he is in this kind of vegetative state almost. He can't answer any questions, and
maybe kind of catatonic, maybe not vegetative, I don't know, yeah. But like not himself. Yeah,
right. Episode Burnham tries to find, she's looking for the Vulcan planet, and then the computer gets caught in a loop, in a riff in the space-time continuum thing, and Tyler wants to know what happened to Burnham, but Burnham is on this mission to go to try to find Spock. Spock as a little kid, and he says that emotions confuse me. Her mother says, this is not the Spock that you know, that you remember. It's not how you remember him. And so there's I don't know, kind of this, first she says that, oh, he's not there, but then finally she relents and shows him, and he's in like this cave, kind of muttering things under his breath. What did you think about all of this with Spock?
It's kind of familiar. It reminds me a little bit of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, where we meet a Spock without his soul, right? He's kind of this, he's swiftly maturing on the Genesis planet, and he doesn't really speak. He's not really 100% himself, right? So we kind of get that a little bit. And then also in Star Trek 4, he's still a little blinkered, like he's still not quite 100%. He's just got his Katra back, and he's just not quite all there. All right, so we've kind of seen similar kinds of takes on a Spock he's not quite totally there before, but this is kind of a different way of doing that, in a way that looks more like neuroatypical kind of run amok, like autism or Asperger's run amok, or but like temporarily, where like he just can't, he's kind of stuck in himself.
Yeah, I know that some people were kind of upset with the kind of adding more sort of mental illness to Spock, and kind of
right, because we find out he's dyslexic, right? Yeah.
Were you bothered by that?
Not especially. I thought it was kind of interesting. And it's one of those things, like I get the objection. Like, I understand why people are sort of rolling their eyes at that. By the same token, though, that if I found out that someone I know and like, turns out they have a little bit of a learning disability, I go, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Now I understand you a little better. But it's not like, oh, come on, it's a gimmick or something. So, of course, in real life, it's not writers dictating who has learning disabilities, but it's something they have no control over. But in this case, like, I felt like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting and cool. So now I understand something about Spock I didn't know before, and it's cool to learn something new about someone so familiar.
Did it feel like the same character though to you?
Well, I felt, yeah, it did. It felt like I was seeing another side of him. I mean, I kind of compare it to like when, I've been married to my wife for going on 15 years this year. But when we get together at parties with friends or whatever, she'll tell stories from her past, and more often than not, that's where I go, you've never told that story before. And as I've constructed sort of these stories from her past, from before we were married, I've come to realize that there's this other person I never met, and it's her at 19 or her at 15 or whatever age. These different versions of her. It's still her, and I'm sure that she still had kind of I know some sort of the bedrock of her temperament and her personality, but it's interesting to hear how that changed over time and under different circumstances. So no, I feel like I'm getting to know an old friend better.
Interesting. I can see that. Yeah. In the Vulture column, and I've been mistakenly referring to the writer of this, Devin Maloney, as a male. She's actually a female. I apologize for that. I didn't know that. But anyway, she does a really good job every week, I think. And it was interesting. I thought she gave it a very low score this episode. She didn't like it. She said that, especially after the streak of excellent installments we've seen here on Star Trek Discovery, Light and Shadows was, to put it as kindly as I know how, a cluster frick. For starters, it's baffling that we're adding a brand new learning disability to Spock's laundry list of issues, given that the only thing really needed to convey that he was primed for a mental breakdown is the fact that he's a half-human expected to act full Vulcan. Physiologically, Vulcans are like superpowered monks. They're able to connect physically across long distances, as we've seen, but also literally control their own body functions, including neural pathways in their brains. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. It says, to what degree that applies to Spock's physiology in this timeline is at this point entirely up for speculation, given his dual identity. That difference alone could explain a learning disability in a Vulcan context. And while I'm not a psychiatrist, Michael's revelation that the numbers Spock is repeating are reversed coordinates does seem like a massively convenient interpretation of how dyslexia how dyslexia works. And
sure, it's anyway, it's a shorthand TV version of how dyslexia works. I'll give her that. Yeah.
So she felt like we don't need to add. It was an explanation that we didn't need. That it adds another kind of to these. She says the laundry list of problems that poor Spock has to deal with. I don't know. Do you see anything in what she's saying, or what do you think?
I mean, I understand the argument. I understand the eye rolling here, but it's not. It doesn't bother me.
Interesting.
When I heard it, it doesn't now.
All right. And so, what do you think of this actor that's playing Spock, the new actor?
I think he's doing a solid job.
Yeah.
No issues.
Cool.
Now, of course, we haven't, gotten a lot out of him. He's kind of in this, he's not really. We haven't seen him be himself yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we haven't seen Spock on the bridge of the Enterprise doing his job yet. Like, we're most familiar with seeing him. So these are kind of weird circumstances. It's kind of hard to judge yet, honestly. I think his voice is right. Like, that's how I would, that's the kind of cadence and timbre I'd go for if I were performing Spock.
And this Ethan Peck is his name, the actor. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have a huge problem with him. He seemed fine. But I was very excited because when they showed little Spock, the actor, Liam Hughes, is an actor that was on When Calls the Heart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like really cute, very talented little actor. So it was kind of fun to see him in something, as big as this show. So that was kind of exciting. But what did you think of this whole idea of using Alice in Wonderland as kind of his mother's way of explaining the world kind of to Spock?
I think it's a great way of using the canon. It uses a tiny little detail, deeply embedded in an original series episode, right? And it and just runs with it like crazy. And I think that's a really cool. That's cool to see. It's neat to see. Well, again, it goes back to like I feel like I'm getting to know Spock a little better, and it's. And yeah, I'd never thought of Alice in Wonderland as as sort of a handbook for human illogic, but that's an interesting reading of it. I'd never thought of it that way before. So I'm having all kinds of fun with it.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea that sort of thinking about going to Wonderland as being kind of a way to, it's almost a catharsis,
Yeah.
an escape from what your from what might be burdening your mind. And I liked that whole idea. It was interesting to me. So anyway, yeah.
Well, and also just the encountering the unknown and testing, learning about yourself by in the and encountering the unknown is the anvil by which you determine who you are, right? I'm not saying it very well, but you understand what I'm saying, like that. Yeah. You're experiencing new things shapes who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, and experiencing things well outside your experience.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing of Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't really have a plot. It's just her meeting one new thing that's crazy and hard to kind of understand after another thing after another thing. And so in a way it would be a perfect kind of escape, because it's really just about experiencing new things and trying to understand them when they make no sense. They're nonsense. The whole point of the book is about engaging in nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarek finds them because she's been hiding him, and then
she's trying to shelter him because he's a fugitive, right?
Yeah.
So she's trying to shelter him under Sarek's diplomatic immunity, but he sort of shows up and says, "Not so fast."
Right. And the whole Section 33 crew of Leyland and Giorgio are looking for Spock and for Burnham, and because they think that Spock committed these crimes, killed these 3 people. And he keeps saying this 749148 over and over and over and over again. And they figure out that there's coordinates for a planet. And so they are able to, and then we see in the next episode, they are able to go and find those coordinates, and we'll get to know more. But yeah, so basically this is about Spock and Burnham meeting again, and us learning about this learning disability and this sort of confrontation between Sarek and Amanda. And so that's sort of the Spock part of the story, and then also sort of the angel, and whether there's a question of, did he create did the angel choose him, or did he choose the angel? Who created the angel? What is the angel? What's going on? And so we get to find more about that in the next episode.
Yeah, before we move on, I do have to point out what an awesome, a couple of cool things. For one thing, I think it was this episode, they do a cool name check on where Spock disappeared. He disappeared in the Mutara sector. They call it the Mutara sector. The Mutara Nebula is where the Genesis project is launched several years later. And it's, the Mutara system is a forbidden area, and after the Genesis project explodes, no one's allowed to go there, right? So they have to steal the Enterprise to go find Spock there. Anyway, just a cool fan service thing. But then also the cool fist fight between Giorgio and Michael. It's actually staged.
Right.
But they have to make it look good because Giorgio's, her machinations are proceeding, to try to undermine her CO in Section 31.
That's right. Because Giorgio basically lets her go because she wants to basically take over for Leland. I think his name is Leland. And so that, that was kind of interesting. And it was a pretty good little fight there. Even obviously it's staged, but that was good.
Yeah, no, I like the overall, I've said this before, but I really like that we're getting the fist fight of the week, the way we did with the original series. It's kind of a cool to see a new show bring back things from the original series that none of the other spinoffs have ever tried to do, or they just haven't emphasized in the same way. So it's neat.
Right. So then you have Tyler and Pike working together. Tyler wants to know what happened to Burnham.
Yeah, in quotes, working together, more like fighting like cats and dogs, right? Yeah.
Right. And so obviously that's interesting. And they go out and they create this kind of time tsunami, they call it. There's a temporal distortions between Tyler and Pike. And so Saru kind of takes over and he changes the mission from a research mission of this planet to a rescue mission, but they only have like a small window in order to rescue them and where they can save them, or they'll be lost to kind of this time rift. And then they bring in Stamets to try, because he has the spore drive sensitivity, to try to help them. And there's a probe with a giant, it almost looked like a giant octopus kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it, that attacks the ship. And so then they try to attack the probe, and it's very messy. And eventually Pike shoots it, and they're able to beam them up onto the ship. And but the probe was managed to get like tons of data from them while it was attached. And
yeah, that probe was interesting. There's a lot. Star Trek has done that kind of thing a lot before. In Star Trek: The Motion Picture, right? We have the Voyager probe coming back from its long journey and its encounter with whatever alien race it finds, and it's so drastically changed we don't even recognize it.
That's true.
And then also like Nomad from the episode the Changeling from the original series. That's another Earth probe, right? That gets lost in space and refitted with alien tech and sent back unrecognizable.
Or what about the one in the fourth movie?
That was not one of ours. That was just an alien probe out of nowhere.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they say a time tsunami is coming, and there's it's just interesting.
Yeah, kind of cool.
You get a lot of dialogue between Tyler and Pike, and also with them working. And then you get some moments. It was nice to see Saru get some moments of leadership again.
Right. Yeah, true. He seems to slide into that really comfortably, doesn't he?
Yeah, which was nice, especially after last week.
Yeah,
it was so emotional for him.
And the sort of the slap fight between Pike and Tyler was interesting, because I felt like Tyler was kind of projecting, because he's like, oh, you're just trying to get yourself killed. You just have survival's guilt because you were on your 5-year mission during the war. So you never got a chance to defend your home. So you're just trying to get yourself killed. Tyler's thinking like a Klingon, but I also think he's projecting. I think Tyler has some survival's guilt about surviving the war. It's my opinion.
That makes sense. And he obviously has some major guilt about what he did to Culber.
Yeah.
I mean, of course
or at least there's some real discomfort, and
So it was interesting, again, in the Vulture column, she says about the whole idea of the time tsunami, that she says, I have questions about why we needed to plunge into another extreme Starfleet math sports scenario this week, just to come out of it with a probe that has been Sentinel from the Matrix upgraded and tossed back, ostensibly from the Red Angel's future. Why didn't a similar space-time rift suck up the exploratory craft that went to study the spot where this first signal appeared. And she says, did the rift and or the time tsunami, the discovery barely escaped at the end, have any impact on Kaminar? I'm not sure what that is. But given the coordinates were
Saru's
right.
planet.
What's that?
Kaminar is Saru's planet.
Okay. Oh, right. Oh, right. Yeah, good memory. Given the coordinates were right above the planet. And either way, why didn't a single crew member, not even Saru, voice that risk? And so anyway, she just felt like it was just kind of she says, for the sake of brevity, I'll leave unspoken the rest of my queries about the implications of space-time rifts and how they present in this episode. I'm just nonplussed as to why we needed to keep things at an 11 across the board this week. My nerves are tired.
That's a fair criticism of this show. I keep wishing that they would slow down a little and maybe have a silly one. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Have an episode where everybody goes crazy, or that everybody had fun with that time loop episode last season. Why, how about a little fun instead of just full court press, like just nonstop? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, she says, while I wouldn't exactly recommend skipping this episode, just know that the bulk of what happens here, Michael finds Spock, rescues Spock, and gets coordinates to a profoundly upsettingly significant planet from Spock, all while Pike and Tyler pick up technology from 500 years in the future that has now secretly hacked, that feels like a 42-minute checklist interlude to the real story that's about to unfold next week. Rest up, crew.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It is one of those episodes that feels like a pipeline episode. We have to get from A to B. So
yeah, I was just thinking about that with actually with Captain Marvel. No spoilers or anything, but it does every once in a while. You have these movies in the MCU that feel like they're fine. I enjoy them just fine, and they have fun parts and everything, but they exist a little bit more as pieces of this larger puzzle, more than as a necessary movie. And obviously they are necessary because we need to get all that information out to tell the story, this larger story. And so yeah, that's probably somewhat kind of like what's happening here. So it's interesting. Yeah, she gave it 2 out of 5 stars.
No, that's a little harsh, but but I understand.
Yeah,
I'd say more like 3.5, but okay.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I thought the stuff with Spock was pretty interesting. I think I can see the point of why some diehard fans are like, feel like it's sort of changing his character or adding to his character or whatever. But I thought it was interesting enough, and their relationship, I think, is interesting. Their dynamic, and we really see that come up in this next episode. So it's called "If Memory Serves." And did you just about die when they had those clips?
Oh yeah, when it said coming next week, and I'm seeing Teloshians and stuff, I'm like falling out of my chair. Yeah. I had no idea they'd go there. Like, just blew my mind for sure, and I was real excited.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the episode, they have clips from Star Trek, and you see the original series, the episode "The Cage." I mean, it makes sense really when you think about it, because here you have Pike, and so it kind of makes sense to go back to his the pilot with Pike, and so you have this. It starts out with Pike asking Tyler if his relationship with Burnham is strictly professional, and he says, "I was in love with Michael, but I violated her trust." And so they
can we just take a second to acknowledge that they used footage from another series to set up what was going to happen in this episode in this series?
Yeah,
that Star Trek's never done that before, and
interesting.
I hope that's a portent of things to come, in terms of like Star Trek becoming more fluid and less this is this and this, less TV dinner partitioned.
Yeah.
Like, no, the peas and the mashed potatoes can't touch. No, let's mix up the peas and the mashed potatoes. Yes, please.
Right. I like that. I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I agree. And so, yeah, so he talks a little about their relationship, and there's this whole, like, obviously it's an interesting thing because Tyler is Vok, but he's
Hmm.
still Tyler. Like, where's that line? We don't know.
Hmm.
And
And he probably couldn't even tell you.
yeah, yeah. And we find a planet there, and that there's been a nuclear event on the planet, but that a small remnant of the species remains, and it turns out it's Talos,
Hmm.
and where the original The Cage episode had happened. And so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, the Star Trek was one of those weird shows that had two pilots. They did one pilot for NBC called The Cage, and it had Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike, and and Spock was in there. But other than that, other than Spock, none of the other cast members moved on. But in any case, they filmed that episode. It was too expensive. NBC said, "Well, you know what? Give us another pilot. See if you can do it a little cheaper." And they did with William Shatner, and they kind of redid the cast a bit, and that's how we got the show we got. They ended up using bits of that in an episode called The Menagerie, which is worth a look. And So yeah, that's how we get Captain Pike, is that he comes from that original pilot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So they go to Talos 4, and Spock basically needs the Talosians' help to put his kind of brain back together from after seeing the Red Angel. And we find out that the Red Angel is human from the future,
Mm-hmm.
and that he had this dream. And so they he wants to go because the Talosians have this like inception like power, I guess, to kind of.
Sure. Yeah, they can make you think or see whatever they want you to think, or they can make you perceive anything that they want you to perceive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they can read your thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so there's this woman there named Vina, and she tells them, she says, "I'm an old friend of Pike," and uh, they're able to communicate like telepathically, like you say. And uh, she basically says that Spock has a variance that will make him crazy, that will and we find out it kind of goes back as they're exploring his psyche. They go back to this wound that Spock has from childhood that Michael Burnham inflicted upon him. And you get this whole scene of and this whole scene of the of child Burnham leaving Spock, and this
She kind of she white fangs him.
yes, she says that he's a cold half-breed freak who could never love anything, that it could not be possible. And obviously this is not like true, but it's like this defining experience, and she was just saying it to kind of protect him from uh from all of that. I don't know, she was just that he says that this was a defining experience in his life, but Spock denies that it is. But uh you see you see them switch off between them as adults having this argument, and then as children having the argument, and it's just pretty devastating.
Yeah, that was a great choice. I really like that part of it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you think is the purpose of this? Is all part of uh in finding the Red Angel, is kind of getting to the core of this defining moment of Spock's life. And why do you think that Burnham did this as a child?
I think she felt like, um, she felt like she was a danger to Spock. Like she was worried about the Vulcan extremists attacking their home because she was there as a human being living as a member of their family, right? Because they were under threat from extremists who were against the idea of Federation and Earth culture diluting Vulcan purity or whatever.
Right.
So in order to to ensure that Spock was safe, she said some pretty awful things to him to try to get him to not stop following her around like a puppy, like brothers tend to do, and to just divorce herself from the family a little bit.
Yeah. She says, I don't want you in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You weird little half breed. And then she says she did it just to keep him safe from the logic extremists that were kind of hunting them down in that day. And so they there's just a pretty powerful dynamic that's going on there, and you kind of feel for Burnham because I mean she was just a child too, but she had to. She probably made mistakes, but she certainly had the best of intentions, and yet she had to inflict all this pain on her brother, and I don't know. It's an interesting situation.
It is, yeah, and I want to point out too something about the Talosians, which is one of the reasons why The Cage has become my favorite episode of all time. Mm-hmm. Which it's amazing that they hit it so well out of the park on the first try, but sorry, excuse that. Anyway, yeah, the Talosians are interesting because they're basically just TV addicts, right? They've been living underground for thousands of years. They have nothing to do but cultivate the power of the mind and just kind of watch TV, right? So they capture they've been capturing alien species and to breed them for entertainment and to sort of repopulate the planet. Mm-hmm. And Burnham really early on gets that that's what they're about. They're like, we want to see where you wounded Spock. We want to see that episode. And they're like, why? Or Michael's like, why? Right. For your entertainment? She's got him. Like she knows that she's got their number. And what's funny is that like it's sort of meta because here we are saying, oh yeah, they're so awful. All they care about is just watching people hurt for entertainment. And here we are watching these characters hurt for our entertainment. Right? I like that aspect of Star Trek that like it's the only TV show that's telling you should be turning off the TV. And so we get a little bit of that, and because it's sort of a cheap trick to bring back. I admit it's kind of a cheap trick to bring back the Talosians and the singing blue flowers and stuff, and Vina, and just to make me clap like a seal. Okay, I get that I'm getting my buttons are getting pushed, but all that aside, the writers understand that episode, and it's clear that they understand that episode from the way they wrote this one. Because the Talosians are still going to be Talosians, right? They're still going to do what they do.
Right. Well, and also that you have an interesting dynamic between Spock and Burnham, where she wants to kind of move on from this kind of thing, and then be the same as they always were, and be united together or whatever. Whereas like Spock is more logical about all of this. He says, I'm not here to absolve you, Michael Burnham. This is not about your feelings. And he's very, even though it's a very emotional scene, he knows that they have to kind of hash this out in order to get to the spot where then they can get closer to, finding the Red Angel and saving everything and absolving himself and all of that stuff. And so by the end, when she actually sees what happened as far as those murders and everything, like, it is logical to her now what happened and why he did what he did. And so I don't know, it's a very interesting kind of situation.
Yeah, what I like about the scene where she cuts him off and she calls him a weird little half-breed or whatever. That has meaning for me because there's I think there's at least one, maybe two episodes of the original series where Spock is not right. He's been influenced by some alien, whatever, and Kirk has to get his attention. He has to get him riled up and get him mad. Which we kind of see that in the Star Trek 2009 film too, where he has to like insult Spock to get him pissed off. Which, by the way, critics of those movies, watch the original series, because if you think that's not out of character for Spock, you haven't seen the show. Okay, because you piss off Spock, he will beat the stuffing out of you. Right, and especially if you use the H word. If you call him a half-breed, you're done. And it's cool that they sort of give us we sort of get the origin story of like, this is why that triggers him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of neat.
It's interesting, in the Vulture column, she says that this was a heinous and indeed defining experience, no matter how much Spock denies it. The interspersing of Martin Green and Peck recreating the children's argument as adults and breaking my cold, dead heart in the process makes that much more obvious. I just hope that they can cry and work it out and hug by the finale. Otherwise, my therapist is going to have an irritating view. So,
good. I'm glad she's not so hard bitten and cynical as to roll her eyes at that, because
she loves this episode. She didn't like the last one. She loves this one. 5 stars. Good. She really.
Yeah, it was a goodie. Oh yeah, I did. So much goodness here, and yeah, this is it was really cool to have one of my favorite episode so lovingly I don't know, homaged or whatever, but like now I'm clamoring for hey, I'll help pay for it. I'll kick in some money if I can get other fans to join in. Remake the cage.
Kickstarter. Yes.
Yeah, because you got the cast, you got number one, you got everybody you need. Remake the cage.
Yes. So yeah, you get some scenes with Vina and Pike talking. She's able to telepath or whatever to talk to him, and she says, "When you left, it was worse because I knew I'd lost." But she actually, I guess, creates an illusionary Pike there on the planet.
That's where we leave her in the cage, is that the Telosians say, oh no, she'll be fine, and we see, quote, Pike go back down into the subterranean caves with Vina, right, while the real Pike beams back up to the Enterprise. So, and actually, and in the Menagerie, they kind of reworked that, where, the issue is that Pike, we know that tragically he gets into an accident. Sorry, people who don't know this. Tragically, he gets into an accident where he's pretty debilitated, and to the point where he rolls around in this spacey-looking wheelchair, and the only way he can communicate is by blinking once for yes and twice for no. And Spock ends up taking him back to Talos 4, and he sort of lives out the rest of his existence with Vina in a condition where he's like himself, right? Just like they did for Vina. She was a mess when she crashed, and they were able to make her feel like herself, and they do the same for Pike. So they're kind of star-crossed lovers. They do end up together, but sort of in a bittersweet, sort of semi-tragic way.
Yeah. And they did a good job, I think, with casting Vina. She looked a lot like the original, I think.
No, yeah, she did, and actually, I thought she brought a little more. Her performance was fit the modern the modern tone of the show or of Discovery, but it wasn't wildly inconsistent with I can't remember, her name escapes me now, with the other actress's performance in the original either. So like it was very well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so basically her job is to convince Pike to come and get Burnham and Spock.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a brief time where you see Spock shows Burnham, like I said, when he did the murders, and you can see all of that. And they're very clever about how they beam the illusions of themselves up onto the 31 ship, and
Yeah.
and then it turns out, of course, they're actually being beamed up onto the Discovery, and so that was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was a fun bit of trickery.
Yeah, and it says, I like the Vulture. She says that this emotionally blindsided Pike at the sight of his long lost love. It's a compelling, if thin, moment of tenderness we hadn't yet gotten from him. He takes a fully unsettling leap of faith, though, trusting her and the Telosians to help them save Spock and Burnham and evade Section 31's grasp, becoming fugitives from Starfleet as they rush to prevent galactic apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And this is so great because it sets up so beautifully the menagerie. Like, okay, so this is how he knows, how both he and Spock know. The Telosians are people they can trust.
mm-hmm.
Like they have an established relationship now. We can work with these people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and plus it puts them against Starfleet, which is something that it seems like, especially if you're going back to the original series,
Mm-hmm.
that was, that's very, Captain Kirk to me is kind of being a little bit of a rebel.
Sure, yeah, a little bit, and also like using the circumstances to your best advantage. Yeah, it kind of feels like what they're doing with Section 31 is. It's a bit of a mystery to me. I'm kind of doing what I did last season, where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put faith in the writers and write it out. But because it's what they're doing is fairly inconsistent with the way they've handled Section 31 and other shows. In the sense that like they have badges, everybody knows who they are. What? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's such a secret society. They have their own badges, so everybody knows who you are. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
In Deep Space Nine, they're pretty clandestine and under the radar, right? So it's like, well, okay, I get, I'll take the ride. I'll see where they're going with it. But
right. And Colbert, the other part of this episode is Colbert and Stamets, and she has the Colmets in the article.
Oh, okay, got it. As a couple, yeah, Colmets.
Yeah. Anyway, and so yes, so basically Stamets is wanting everything to be back the same, is trying to like cook for him, trying to make everything the same, and he's just getting more and more uncomfortable. Nothing feels right, nothing feels natural, and it's pretty, he finally loses it, he finally explodes, and he, he says, "What's normal about this? You want me to pick up where we left off? But I have no idea what that means." And
right.
So that was pretty devastating. What did you feel about that?
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that bit in Harry Potter where it's like the tale of the three brothers, and the one of the brothers gets a stone that will bring back the dead, and so he brings back his dead wife, but it turns out she's kind of a wisp of what she was. Like it's got a feeling of like a fantasy creature who's like you somehow raise the dead, but it's at a terrible cost, right? Like somehow they aren't really who they once were. So I think it's interesting what they're doing with it, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and the whole idea of sort of being kind of uncomfortable in your own body,
yeah,
feeling almost ashamed of your body and what happened, and it's I don't know, it's interesting because then he comes in contact with Tyler, and he kind of feels in a weird way the same way, Tyler, because he's also not his own.
They have this odd bond, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so they kind of fight it out a little bit, and this is definitely a conflict that they've been building towards, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of what they do to sort of resolve this, because how do you resolve it? I don't even know.
Right.
Like, are they just broken up now, or is there going to be some way that he's able to connect with Stamets again in a new way? Is it going to be different but better? Is it going to be what? Because now you have like 3 characters that are not in their like correct bodies, if you think about it, because Giorgio
Right.
also is the Terran, the Terran race, whatever, and different than her original, at least, body on the show.
Yeah,
And
identity is a real interesting theme, and I hadn't noticed all these connections until you mentioned it. So I'll have to watch that as it
yeah,
develops.
it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because they have a lot of stuff to wrap up in just only a couple more episodes this
That's true.
season.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Also, we did find out that I was wrong last episode. I thought, I didn't know if I saw season 3, because I just felt like nobody was really talking about it, and I knew it was a pretty expensive show, and
Yeah, like the next day.
the next day they announced season 3. So shows what I know about anything. But anyway, so yeah, it was a pretty tense episode. But basically, you had that conflict between Stamets and Culber, and then also with Tyler, and you had the Pike agreeing to go and help and save Burnham and Spock. I'm really excited now that Spock is on the Discovery to see what is going to happen. And it's they're not heading to Star Quarters anymore. They're off doing their own thing, and they are going to try to stop this Red Angel from destroying all of humankind. And so that's a pretty noble endeavor.
Yeah, and it's fun when they're cut loose and they're saying, the hell with our orders. We're gonna save the galaxy. That's when Star Trek is at its most fun.
Yeah. You did get it in the and Culber says to Tyler, "I don't know who I am anymore," and then Tyler says, "Who do you think you're talking to?" This the big bull. Who do you think you're talking to? And so it's going to be interesting. And the the vulture says that at this point, I'm not sure whether there is a soul in this galaxy Shazad Latif, who plays Tyler, could not have sexual chemistry with, but I'm certainly not interested in finding out. So there you go.
She has some funny ideas about Tyler flirting with everyone he meets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least he got rid of the man bun. She was not a fan of that. Anyway, so there you go. That is this episode, and she gave this one a 5 out of 5. This one was great. It was really entertaining. You got to know the characters a lot better, and it had some fun lighter moments, like when they the whole illusions tricking 31. That was fun. Mm-hmm. And some other things, but then it also had a lot of intense moments too. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, they used all the colors this time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. Well, great. Well, it was so fun to talk to you about these episodes, and let us know in the comment section what you thought of them, and do you like where the show is going, and were you surprised that it got renewed? So let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts. And so, Tom, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Elmano Roboto and at Happy Place Poems.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews on iTunes and YouTube. Please put in your ratings and reviews on iTunes. And if you're listening on YouTube, if you can give us a thumbs up, we really appreciate it. So thanks so much. And we will talk again in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.